Be informed, be inspired. Join us for the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show. Tune in and listen for both modern and ancient wisdom on all things maternity, parenting and sacred women's business, right here on the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show.
You're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet. Our show is coming to you from the studios of Bay FM in Byron Bay and is broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network. When most couples discover they're pregnant, they reach for books and courses on childbirth, how to survive this unknown and often scary sounding experience. Some couples suspect there's also something profound to discover in the experience of birthing, but they're keen to do all they can to make sure it's as safe as possible. Throughout the course of the pregnancy, there are checkups, tests, scans, many decisions to make along the way. And so the 9 months pass with the physical process of birth as a couple's primary focus. But what have they done to prepare emotionally for this huge transition? According to the Relationship Research Institute in Seattle, approximately 2/3 of couples find their relationship has suffered within the 3 years of the birth of a child. And within 5 years of the birth of a first child, 13% of married couples in the US divorce, and this rate goes up to 39% for defacto couples after the same point of 5 years after the first child's birth. These are American stats, but surely there is some preparation that couples can do rather than just adjusting to your relationship on the run after the baby arrives. I have with me today Sean Tonnet, who is a relationship therapist working for the last 10 years with a particular focus on transition to parenthood, and he's the father of 2 children, 10 and 8. I also have with me Tondi Gilfillan, a mother of 1, a 2-year-old, and a relationship therapist working with couples and families for the last 10 years also, with a special interest for supporting couples in transition and perinatal support for mothers and fathers. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sally.
Many of the couples you see are already parenting their children. What are the primary struggles that you see them with?
I think one of the main things that Tondi and I and others who are working with parents, couples who are becoming parents, is supporting them to understand the dynamics of their relationship, supporting them to get more clarity around some of the patterns that are in their relationship and are often symptomatic of the relationship that's been in place for much longer than the baby and the growing of the baby and the birthing. And that can be really important to support how couples start to communicate more, how they start to build new skills, build new understanding about each other and becoming parents. And it's those skills that they're learning, the ways that they start communicating and their understanding that they're building around those dynamics and patterns that are in the relationship that are really important for supporting them once baby's arrived.
Like Sean said, the big things that really stand out are these really difficult communication cycles and relationship dynamics that have taken place. And a lot of the themes that I've seen come up, what struck me, and I guess what's really inspired me to be on this radio and look into this all, is how could we have given relationships more scaffolding before the arrival of the baby to deal with all these unknown pressures that come on relationship post-baby. One thing I always start telling couples is one thing that really strikes me with the stresses that they come is that a lot of the stresses on the relationship are circumstantial stresses, in that couples are often coming in absolutely exhausted and sleep deprived. They might not have had a decent night's sleep for 6 months, and they've had hardly any time for their relationship. They've just been under enormous pressure. And they come in and say, you know, God, we're arguing more. We're having ridiculous arguments at 3 o'clock in the morning about who's going to feed the baby. We're arguing about what kind of food to eat, and feeling like their whole relationship has just turned into this crazy kind of bickering. I always like to assure them that a lot of that is going to be normal and inevitable, because in those first years of parenting, you're adjusting to such adverse conditions, which is sleep deprivation, learning an enormous new job of taking care of this vulnerable little being, and that a certain element of that is going to be inevitable. But what I do notice is that the couples that really come undone with that is the ones that really haven't had a good base of how to manage conflict and difference as well. You know, so these little fires, these little differences turn into monsters, and they kind of get into like these cycles you're talking about, Sean, you know, where it becomes a defense attack fiesta around these issues, rather than being able to, I guess, talk really openly about their vulnerability and what they're finding difficult, and having more of a culture of understanding and embracing that vulnerability and having a compassionate eye for these difficult circumstances.
And so you've seen a need to look into helping parents during the through the prenatal period to prepare, because you work so much with parents who are new parents. You've come to see, wow, there's work that could be done while preparing for baby's arrival.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one figural thing that's really stood out for me that I've come to appreciate more is this theme of expectation. You know, I find the couples that have landed in this journey with unrealistic expectations of what parenthood is going to be like, you know, e.g., life is actually going to return to normal. Our relationship is going to return to normal. You know, baby's just going to come along our lives as they were. And a lot of couples find that there's this massive shock of realizing that there's a new normal, actually. Things are never going to go back to how they were. And I think if there'd been more really in-depth conversations around realistic expectations versus unrealistic expectations pre-birth, those couples would have better coped with those changes. I think it's a law of nature. When we're prepared, we cope better with uncertainty. And actually parts of the brain, the learning centres of our brain, are more primed to cope with change when there's preparation. There's actually really interesting studies on that.
We see lots of couples and lots of families. It's really evident for us that when couples are coming in either prenatally or perinatally, that there's the struggle for them is sometimes, again, really deeply understanding their dance as a couple. And again, I reiterate that some of that's symptomatic of a relationship that's longer than having families. Having a baby must include something about upskilling as a couple. And I know lots of couples get this, and I know lots of people in our community get this. And yet we still see, as couples therapists and working with families, we still see couples who are coming in who sadly fall into the statistics that you were mentioning earlier. Something for us is about really providing more ground for couples who want to take extra resources that organisations like Interrelate offer as an opportunity to see more about their birthing journey.
The more I'm listening to you and thinking about this, I'm coming to see how this should be the foundational childbirth preparation, because when you've got that dance between you that's worked out through the course of making all the decisions through the course of your pregnancy about what kind of care and what should we do in this situation or that situation, you get to share that together. And, that's really great training ground and would hopefully enable the sorts of conversations that you can bring into childbirth education for learning about the physical process. We were talking earlier, Tondi and Sean, about the scaffolding. You use this term, relationship scaffolding. just prior to that, we were talking about how you so often see couples when they're already on the other side of the birth and the relationship coming undone because of the really full-on challenges. Because, you know, what we don't have here in this society is the village. So we can have lots of awareness about, oh, yes, we need to get better at communicating and so on. But if there isn't the time to just be together without the relentless pressures that a new baby and twins even for some couples or multiples puts you under, you can't really address those. You don't have the time and space to look at the relationship, and so much comes undone. So in your interest in helping couples prepare for birth, I'm curious to find out more about relationship scaffolding.
You bring up that really good point there of learning new skills when you're under huge pressure is really hard. So having that preparation before, you know, serves couples so well. And one main thing that comes to mind around that is getting couples before Bub is born to really think about what their expectations are around parenthood, and having those hypothetical discussions around different issues that they might face in this huge new job that they're about to embark on. And that can involve, you know, discussions around what their ideas and beliefs around things as simple as food and diet, things around how they imagine roles and responsibilities are going to be shared. And one, you know, personal example of that comes to mind is I remember just before our bub came along having a chat with my brother and sister-in-law who had a toddler, and we had this really big discussion around sleep deprivation and what that might mean. And both my husband and I really noticed that we had these ideas already around how we might handle sleep deprivation. And my husband admitted that he thought, well, I would just be doing the nights, and because he might be working, he wouldn't do the nights. And through the discussion and sharing and talking to my brother and sister-in-law, who were really talking about how tough that can be and tough on the woman as well, you know, my husband came around to think, oh, wow, it might not be as black and white as that. I might need to expect that I might need to step in 2 or 3 times a week to help with the nights. So that sounds like a simple thing, but being prepared around things like that can go such a long way, because it's amazing how we can actually carry subconscious ideas and beliefs around parenthood that we're not even aware of. And if we're not aware of, they can just really kind of slap us in the face when we're actually on the run with the job and take both couple by surprise of, oh my God, I had no idea you thought that, or you thought that, and then they're kind of, you know, grappling with the significant differences on the run.
I think expectations is a really important point. For me, my deep interest for couples is around their dance, which I mentioned before, and something about how do each couple build more understanding around what they bring to the relationship that's both positive and exciting, and how a couple build intimacy, and also where they block or hinder that. So, and a simple example, and it's not simple for the people going through it, I guess, but an example might be for a man who becomes a dad, and his experience is that once the baby's in the world, he feels, lonely or isolated because mum, it's in a heterosexual relationship, of course, mum is taking the time and the important time to nurture and be with baby, and dad somehow gets triggered around that experience and feels isolated or alone, or the relationship's changed in a way where he's getting triggered. Now, for that symptom will have been in the relationship much longer than baby. That's a symptom for a man who perhaps hasn't looked at or had deep understanding and learning and knowledge around intimacy and loneliness that might be connected to his family journey of being parented and growing up in a particular family. And for me, that's really significant and important stuff for couples to start building more awareness around. When couples can start to do that, prenatally and in part of the the birthing journey, they can really start to then lean into the other conversations around expectations in a way where they're not getting triggered. And stereotypical gender specific stuff might be around, Tondi mentioned tasks and roles, and there might be for men, and again it's very stereotypical, something around, well, I'm going to be the provider, you're going to be the nurturer. I think it's really important that we understand our values around that. We understand where we get triggered in those conversations, so that we can deeply nurture a different conversation. We can deeply nurture a conversation for mum around her fears or her concerns. For lots of mums,